Welcome to the Music Learning Workshop. My name is Brad Chittister, and we're here today to talk about learning notes. Specifically, what you're going to need to know to be able to read music notes. There are two attributes that you have to be aware of. The first is time value, or what we relate to rhythm, but a note conveys time value. The second is pitch or tone. But really, that's only the beginning of actually reading music, but today that's what we're going to cover. So let's dive right in. Both of these attributes are covered on the master staff. In this case, we can see that the notes are going up and down in the lines and spaces, and they have also different symbols associated with them. On these different symbols, they look like some donut holes here on the bottom. We have what are called whole notes. And then some up here on the top, we have some of those donuts filled in, and we have stems on them, we have some dots, and we have some flags. These all convey some type of duration of the note. So let's talk about these two pieces of the notes information. Time value obviously talks about rhythm and the notes which have beat value. Each of these symbols gives us some value in time. In pitch, it's represented on the staff again, and each note or line or position has a tone associated with it. When we talk about time value, we're really talking about the beat. And this is the standard beat. You hear the big bass drum going, that is the beat of your music. Within that beat, there's some type of meter. In other words, it's grouped in threes or fours or sixes. It has a tempo associated with it, which is nothing more than the speed. And each note or other note that's played along has some type of duration within that time value or that beat. When we talk about getting the beat, this is really a regularly occurring pattern of rhythmic emphasis. In other words, in the waltz pattern, we would get used to that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. In a rock and roll, it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can clamp those out and tap those out in different patterns. You do it all the time when you listen to music. Tempo really is about the speed. Now it can be very slow or very fast, but we donate that by giving something called beats per minute. Typically, you'll see a symbol that is a note with a number behind it. So in this case, we say a quarter note equals 60 beats. Sometimes we just use the old words of largo andante, which is similar in fashion of whether we go slow or fast. We can also give different notes those different beat patterns. In meter, we're grouping those patterns of beats together. Like we talked about the waltz pattern, or a 1-2 clap and count could be a simple meter. The 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, where we're emphasizing the first beat would be a nice waltz pattern. We talked a little bit about the 4-4 pattern, which is used in classical and rock and roll music. And then there's other different ones we can use for up to 6, 7, 8, or even 9 beats per measure. And then in some cases, like Dave Brubeck's Take 5, they do it in 5 beats in a measure. Now duration is how long the notes and rests are played, which means that simply you can have notes that are played, which we hear sound, or we have some notes are silence, which is just quiet, but they still have some duration associated with them. When we talk about note duration, note symbols define duration. Those note symbols we typically use are these that we've shown here, from the donut hole all the way through the double flags. And we have given those names from whole, half, quarter, eighth, and 16th notes in this case. And we have associated rests that work with those as well. Now what we look at is that each of these notes have a head. That is one part of a note, and that is showing us the ability to determine what type of a note it is. We have stems, which further defines it, and then we also add flags, which defines that even further, so that as we add more flags, we shorten the length of time that this note would have. Now this is really talking about the power of 2. Let's look at how these notes are related to each other by using the multiples of 2 or divisions of 2. A whole note is equal to 2 half notes. Very simple, a half plus a half equals a whole. A half note equals 2 quarter notes. A quarter note equals 2 eighth notes. I think you're beginning to get the pattern here. An eighth equals 2 sixteenths. It's nothing more than fractions, which are always divided by 2, or a multiple of 2. We can look at the whole note. It can be 4 quarter notes, or 8 eighth notes, or even 16 sixteenth notes. A half note could be made up of the 2 quarter notes, 4 eighth notes, or 8 16th notes. And of course, the quarter note itself can be made up of 4 16th notes. One other thing that we have to be aware of and be associated with is called the dot. Now, the dot is a unique symbol that allows us to take half the value of the note again. Here we're showing a quarter dot note. and it is equal to a quarter note plus an eighth note. So it gets the value of those two smaller notes put together. So in other words, we're just adding a half as much again. It's 1.5 times the note value. We put this together in time signatures. Now, beat and meter together make a time signature. Here we show various types of time signatures you see on a piece of sheet music. It could be 2/4 over here, the 3/4 time, the 4/4 time, 6/8 time, or even 2/2 time. So what do these numbers mean? Well, the bottom one is the type of beat. In this case, the 4 would represent a quarter note. So we would say that every measure has quarter notes in it. And that would be the basic beat that you would handle, would be the quarter note. How many beats is on top? That means, in this case, the 3/4 time, the 3 on top means there will be 3 beats per measure made up of the quarter notes, which is on the bottom. And the one over on the other side, where we have the 6/8 thing, we have 6 beats in the measure made up of eighth notes. So we count each eighth note as a beat, and we could have 6 of them in the measure. Now, tempo and duration put together is the flow of music, and notes in a measure equals the time signature. Here we start off at the tempo. We say the quarter note equals 60, so it's 60 beats per measure. Our whole note gets 4 counts here, as well as our 4 quarter notes get 4 counts. So those are the same. You can see on top of each other. Now, these notes that add up to 4 beats inside require subdividing the beats, because now we're using that dotted and eighth note structure. But if you add them up together, they would equal 4 beats put together. And this is really how we define rhythm in using the note symbols. It takes a little bit of study, but that's the essence of what a note does for you with rhythm. Now let's jump into part 2 and talk about note sound. And this is really the note pitch. And first of all, it's known more often as the tone that you get out of it. In each tone, we'll give it a note name. And then we'll use these note names over and over. And they'll have a position, which is actually on the master staff. And that position defines whether it's a bass note or a soprano note or an alto note or something like that. So the frequency of vibration is the sound that reaches our ears. And this is really what the tone is, and gives us that frequency. The lower the frequency, such as a bass note, and we can see that here I've added the whole keyboard with all 88 keys, and you can see that we've got very low numbers down at the bottom for low frequencies. Those are bass notes, and as we get up to the top side, you can see we get very high numbers and very high frequencies, which is our soprano side of it, or very high-pitched tones in our note structure. So how do we relate that to something else? Notes have only a few names, and they're basically A through G is the names that we have given them. They're used over and over as a multiple of frequency. In this case, you can see that I've grouped these 4 sets of notes. We go from C to C, or A, B, C, D, and G within that same group, but only going from C to C 4 times on our master staff, and that's what we're showing them. As we move on and look at this, our notes names have modifiers as well. We can have sharps and flats and naturals. Of course, the sharp or flat raises the pitch a half step, and the natural will bring it back to its original foundation. So if we look at a keyboard, we can see here, looking at the A and B specifically, if we sharp the A, we get a half step up onto a black key, which we call the A sharp. If we look at the B and we flat the B, we go down a half step, and we call that B flat. Notice one thing, A sharp or B flat are actually the same tone. There's no difference between those two. Positions show the pitch. Notes go on a staff, or lines, or spaces. The placement of a note on the staff indicates its pitch or position. As you can see, we can start here and go all the way up this one treble clef on our staff, and then we see that we have our 7 basic notes inside of that, but we've used them over and over, but somewhere on that staff is the note name. The master staff, we can place these 7 notes, and we can be on many different places. Here we looked at just the master staff, and I pointed out just a few. In this case, we can see where the C notes are, and there's 5 of them in this case. We start at the very low C, a bass C, a middle C, an upper C, and the very high C. Even on the treble and bass clefs, I've noted here G and F, which are actually what those clefs are named after, the G clef and the F clef. There's 4 octaves in this range of the master staff, and the note ranges are from C to C 4 times, 2 in the bass clef and 2 in the treble clef. Here I've split that apart so you can see the bass clef. Over here we can see we've got those 2 octaves of notes on the bass clef, and over on the right hand side you can see we've got 2 more octaves of notes on the treble clef. Now notes really tell us basically 2 things: time, value, and pitch. Together they are a start to reading music. You have to understand those 2 things to be able to read and play music. You learn the symbols and the time values that are associated with them. You learn the pitch on the master staff. But notes are just a start. You know, from the note basics, you go into relationships. Those are what we call intervals, and the intervals have a very specific relationship. They are related to how scales are put together. And scales are formations of mathematical models that represent a series of notes. Chords are also a combination of those scale notes, and work within a system. And you have to learn each of these as you go on. Now, there really are 5 music element areas you need to learn to be able to read and play music effectively. There's the notes. You got to know that rhythm that goes with the notes. You have to understand keys, scales, and chords to be able to play within a framework or structure. At the Music Learning Workshop, this is just a starting point for notes and relationships. We have a workshop over there that goes into symbols, times, values, and pitch. It covers the master staff. We learn the master staff in really about 20 minutes. We use a story to do that, and then over about 2 weeks we master the master staff by doing some flashcards and learning where all these notes are so that you can read them easily. Intervals and note relationships are all covered in this first workshop. The other workshop is the rhythm workshop, which is the other part of notes. And we talk about basic rhythm and meter and the 4/4, 3/4, 6/8 basic patterns. We subdivide those beats so that you can understand how to put all these notes within those basic beat patterns. And you can use different types of, such as triplets, quadruplets, and even get into a swing rhythm. It's really a 3-step process with rhythm. You've got to learn, one, to experience it. You learn it and experience it. You do this slowly and you approach it from different aspects. Secondly, you gain endurance by practicing that rhythm, by tapping it out or walking it or doing some other type of thing. And then you end up finally acquiring that rhythm and grooving on it, where you can actually control that rhythm and play with it a little bit. That's basically what we covered for notes. You've learned the 2 aspects of time, value, and pitch. Thank you for sitting through our little video here at the Music Learning Workshop, and we invite you to come on over to the website and explore around some more. Thank you.